Alright guys, welcome to Stories from Motorsports. Today we got Doug Kenny and myself and our guest today, Chris Wellman. How you doing, Chris?
Good. Appreciate you guys letting me hop on and join you today.
We're glad to have you, man. Give our followers a little bit of what you're known for.
Yeah, kind of a jack of all trades, I guess you should say, or you could say, really, this kind of age of broadcast. But primarily, I'm a pit reporter for the Motor Racing Network during select NASCAR Camping World Truck Series, Xfinity, and Cup Series races. I also do some work with Flow Racing. I'm actually getting ready to go off to Tulsa for the Tulsa Shootout and the Chili Bowl this winter right after the holidays. And I also made my NBC debut last year doing some IMSA work. I also work for IMSA as their public address announcer as well at the racetrack. So kind of doing a little bit of everything these days.
That's great to hear. It sounds like you've had a tremendous broadcasting career, especially in IMSA. That's a really great series.
Yeah, it really is. And I didn't know really anything about IMSA until about 2.5 years ago now that when I moved to Charlotte and started working on some of their digital pieces and said IMSA. I mean, the only thing I knew was the Rolex 24, just because it's just, their biggest race of the year. And other than that, I didn't know much, but quickly learned, and it's quickly become one of my favorite series. Just, the pure talent of all the drivers, the kind of intense racing that we have with different classes racing at the same time. So the speed differentials and the storylines, and honestly, the people have just been phenomenal. So yeah, IMSA has definitely grown quickly in my heart as one of my favorite series to cover.
That's really cool. So we start these with a question, which is what made you get into racing?
Well, it all started probably, I was about 7 or 8 years old. My dad took me to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first time. I was born and raised just north of Indianapolis in Carmel, and obviously when you are a Hoosier, born and raised, you learn about the Indy 500 before you learn, your multiplication tables in school. That's just kind of what you're kind of grown up to, I guess. And so I've been going to the Speedway for a few years and really fell in love with racing, watching on TV as a kid as well. I was playing ball and stick sports, but I said, I really want to try racing. And nobody in my family knew anything about racing or was mechanically inclined or anything like that. And it just so happened that we were listening to the radio on the way home from school one day, and my now best friend Dylan Welch was racing a quarter midget, and his dad was on the radio at the time in Indianapolis and said, yeah, my son finished third in his race this weekend. And I said, Dad, you got to call the radio station, figure out what this is. I want to do that. So my dad called the radio station. We ended up meeting Vince Welch out there at the Mini Speedway at the fairgrounds in Indy, and I met his son for the first time, and we ended up realizing we went to the same school. We just didn't know each other. He was 2 years younger than me, or still is 2 years younger than me, but at the time, he was in a different grade. So we quickly formed a friendship and learned how to, where to buy a car. And so I started racing quarter midgets at the age of 9, going on 10, and did that for a few years, won several regional championships, finished 4th in the national championship, won 3 or 4 track records, as well as a couple track championships. So really successful quarter midget career. And at this time, I'm in high school, and my high school also had a broadcast program where we had a studio and radio station and all that good stuff, which we were pretty lucky at the time. And so I was kind of dabbing in broadcasting, doing high school basketball and football for Carmel, and at the same time was still racing. And I moved up to micro sprints, was running across Indiana, both wing and non-wing. And racing was so much fun, and to this day I'll still never turn down a ride. But at the same time, I knew that racing is very expensive, and I didn't have a lot of money or a connection to a company that was going to fund my racing career. So I said, well, what else can I do that's not driving that would still, get me to the racetrack and things like that? And, just kind of been watching Dylan's dad, on Fox and, previously ESPN for many years. I said, I want to do that. So I kind of focused my attention, late high school into college at Syracuse into broadcasting, whether it was local track announcing, near home, or if it was the experience I had at Syracuse doing Syracuse basketball and football and lacrosse, and I just really loved it, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, and kind of went from there. So, but the racing stuff, it was probably when I was, probably 7 or 8 is when the bug first hit, and then obviously when I was racing myself until I was probably about 19 years old.
That's really cool. Sounds like you had a great upbringing in racing.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. It's at the time, you think that, like kids that played basketball or football, that was kind of the norm, or soccer or whatever it may be. But, nobody understood why I was racing go-karts or, quarter midgets and then micros. Nobody understood it from where I was from. But, looking back, I was super lucky, to have that opportunity because it's not easy. And certainly, my parents sacrificed a lot, for me to be able to do that, especially out of their own pocket. We didn't exactly have the top-notch equipment, but we had good enough equipment to compete. And, I was lucky enough to win some races on the micro side before I hung things up full-time. So no regrets for sure. But, yeah, it was definitely a blessing, especially now it's been several years since I've ran full-time. And looking back on it, it's definitely grateful.
When was your first Indianapolis 500, if you've ever been to the race in person?
Oh, yeah. I've been to 15, I think, or 16 now. My first race was 2001. Was my first race. I'd been to the track a couple times before then, just on bump day or pole day. But 2001 was the first race. So oddly enough, Helio winning his first of 4 or 500. So pretty cool to see that come full circle, this past year. But yeah, 2001, I'll never forget. It was kind of cold, and at the time, I was a huge Greg Ray fan. Don't ask me why, but I just was a big Greg Ray fan, and I know he was in position to win the race that year until late, so I was kind of disappointed as a kid, but I'll never forget that first one. But ever since then, I've been to now, I believe it's 16. I didn't miss for a while until 2011. My family moved from Indiana to Florida, so I was a part of the move process when the 500 rolled around, so I didn't get a chance to go. And then obviously the last 2 years because of COVID. But other than that, I've been to the 500 since. That's
really cool. What was your reaction to Helio and Penske winning that race?
Oh man, in 2001, I mean, it's kind of blurry because I was probably going into 4th grade at that point, so still pretty young. But I think I was just in awe of a rookie winning the Indy 500 like that. I don't think anybody picked him to win going into the race. Obviously Penske's name at the Speedway was already cemented, legendary status well before then. So I knew at the time, my dad was educating me about, Penske's are good and, they've, won this amount of 500s and things like that. So I kind of knew that going in, but I think I was just in shock about who won. I don't think anybody picked Helio at the time, but I thought it was a great race, and you looking back, I don't think we really understood what we were witnessing about how he would be a 4-time winner. I thought this was a fluke, and one of the regulars or one of the full-time guys that had been competing and challenging for wins years prior would come back and win, but never thought I'd see him be a 4-time.
Yeah, definitely. Do you remember anything about the 2006 race when Hornish nipped Andretti?
Yeah, actually, funny story. So that was one of the races I missed because we were racing quarter midgets at the time, and Dylan and I missed the race because we both were out at in Waterford racing one of the regional races, and he had a motorhome at the time, and we had the race on. And I'll never forget, we're screaming at the television because it was going to come down to the very end, and our crew chief at the time, Josh Travelstead, who will be in my wedding, actually, he was my micro crew chief too. He left the motorhome thinking it was over. He's like, oh, as soon as Hornish shut the door, it's over. Or Marco shut the door, it's over. And I thought it was over too. I was a huge Sam Hornish Jr. fan, and I started walking out of the motorhome, and Dylan started screaming, saying, he's coming back, he's coming back. And we were glued to the television and, going through 3 and 4 and seeing him, just run Marco down like that. Something I'll never forget. We about knocked that motorhome over, screaming and jumping. Hornish making the move down the front straightaway there for the win. So definitely a top 3 moment for sure, even though I wasn't even at the race, to witness that and remember that, so many years later.